questions. When Dr. Liti told me his suggestion that he would talk to you about the death of critical theory, I said that would be a premature abortion to my hard labor in making our students love critical theory. So I said, okay, maybe they would manage to find a way, but I will preserve. This is what I noticed, in fact. And then I saw the new title, which is Once Upon Critical Theory, and I was asking myself, but I immediately realized that it would also preserve that idea of theory, that we can never do that theory, but maybe moving towards an ethics of reading. So you took us to a wonderful universe with the analysis of all this larger society. It was really nice, great, and we felt the critical tendency of analyzing such a wonderful text. But of course, I wish that Professor Bouhlila talked before you, because he gave us a theoretical background, maybe in a lucid way and in a very simplified way. But of course, we were able to make interconnection between your own reading, Professor Beya, and what Professor Bouhlila said. Thank you very much. A very, collaborative spirit in reading and an intellectual debate that I did really appreciate. Now, maybe first I would start by myself asking the difference between ethics and morality, if you don't mind, and then maybe elaborate more on that ethical turn in deconstruction, which I'm sure my students would not understand, because we have already started our first session in deconstruction, and you saved me sessions ahead because you all have already mentioned everything about deconstruction. But they had first that major principle of isolating the text from the outer context and the off text, which Professor Bouhlila talked about, but maybe they would not grasp that idea of finding, what we talked about in class, even before instructors, morality, how to use morality, or how to include morality in the interpretation of the text. That I think our professors will make that point clearer, because we need also to be cautious, not to make the outer environment intervene in our interpretation, maybe ethics in a way. Now, last time I gave them also an example. When I started talking about deconstruction, that sign now that you remember, I said that there is a sign, imagine there is a sign besides a lift or an elevator saying the following, I said what? Seeing eye dogs only, remember last time. And then that sign is open to a multiplicity of interpretations. But of course, we said now, we talked about it, and we said, what does this mean? Does it exclude the other animals or the other types of dogs that are not guide dogs? Does it maybe impel the visually impaired people to get up the stairs and not maybe ascend the lift? So here we had, if we use that ethic, move, we may maybe in our reading we should not offend, if you like, maybe the unsighted, or people who would not be able maybe to read the sign. So I think that maybe it makes sense in that in terms of that ethics of reading. Right. So let me just, if you don't mind, professors, move on to receive some questions from the audience. Who has a question or?
First, I'd like to wish you a warm welcome and thank you for your informative talk on critical theory. I have a comment. I think that the idea of the death of critical theory was initiated by the British professor and literary critic Terry Eagleton in his 2003 book After Theory, and he thought that literature cannot be apolitical, and that literary theory cannot be apolitical either. I think that what he wanted to do is to voice his dissatisfaction with the increasing irrelevance of literary theory, especially in terms of detecting political struggle, and he was turning away from resisting power and the power system. Also, he criticized the fact that literary theory is not dealing with evasive notions like objectivity, morality, evil. I'd like to know your perspective on that view. And I think that Terry Eagleton was so much influenced by his Marxist background.
Thank you, professors.
I'm from Susa.
From Sus, from Sus. Thank you for archaeological reading of logos versus mythos and ethos. So, thank you for your contribution. I'm really enlightened by some deconstructionist reading, the reading of the Plato's concepts. Okay, first I'd like to ask about the Cartesian mind-body dichotomy. How does it refer to our discussion, especially the controversy between logos and ethos? And mind-body dichotomy also was criticized by Levinas himself when he alludes to the self-other relationship as an assignation and the tryst, a legal encounter, before, or I'm quoting, a priori to ontology. So it is not possible with representation, which tends to grasp, understand, know, to have such an ethos is impossible with representation. Second question, if I may, okay. The talk is about critical theory, the crisis. Especially today's crisis, there is a reference, a lot of references to the crisis of critical theory, especially from how to save the text from ideology. So there is kind of conflict between the ideological reading and the text itself. Can we have, I'm alluding probably to Derek Attridge, Theory After Theory and Singularity of Literature, and his book about Qudsiya, ethical reading of some-other encounters in Qudsiya's texts. Okay, thank you.
Critical thinking, whether in practice or theory, have been dealt with largely from a perspective, from a literary perspective. Maybe due to the fact that most of you have majored in literature or critical thinking. So is that applicable to other fields, for instance, linguistics? Because I'm a second year student who is planning to specialize in linguistics. Is that applicable in linguistics? And if so, then we're speaking of interdisciplinarity here. So how does interdisciplinarity affect critical thinking? For instance, if your specialty is linguistics, can you analyze a literary text? For instance, critical discourse analysis. That's one major example. So the second, which in a way or another refers to your last question, how can we be objective while deconstructing a text? Because in our lives we go through institutions that condition us to have one certain singular mono way of thinking. So how can we be objective, especially when it comes to things we relate to on a deep level? For instance, trying to deconstruct a Quranic verse, something that's valuable to us at least. How can we be objective? That's two questions. How does interdisciplinarity affect critical thinking? Does it boost it? Also, I remember just another question. Are there factors that influence critical thinking? Like, for instance, language proficiency is very essential. If you can analyze and read what's between the lines, but you cannot express what you have analyzed, then what's the point? So, are there factors to critical thinking? One question.
Could you repeat the last
question. What are the factors that boost or help critical thinking? I mentioned one example, critical language proficiency, as an example, and there are many others. Like, for instance, the ability to comprehension and all of that. So, yeah, these are my questions.
critical theory? There's a book, I don't remember who, the writer was no, it's not illegal. From Plato to critical theory, or from formalism to critical theory, and they place critical theory as those theories that were produced after the Second World War, with Adorno, Horkheimer, and the Marxist school. This is what they. And this is why when I did not want to get into the whole argument about the conceptualization and what's the definition, what is more appropriate, what is more correct. So I considered critical theory in total by giving the, I think that you mentioned, you certainly were here when I started by the definition itself of the term theory. And if it is critical theory, so there is something that is theory, something is theory, and something else that is critical of. Maybe there are two then, at least two theories. One is not critical, as we are playing here with critical and uncritical, and the other one is critical. There are the two sources of criticism. There are certain theories that are produced within the sphere of the culture itself, which we call the culture that created what they call master narratives, the grand narratives. That is, so it's theories that align within the tradition of thought. Derrida, again, you cannot not think about, we cannot go beyond Derrida. That's the metaphysics of presence. So those theories that followed one another and continue to claim the preponderance of that relation to the big other, big other, big brother.
Big brother.
So the transcendental other. The critical theory materializes, sees some kind of secularization of criticism. Linking that, because there is one that is within the canon of thought. The canon of thought, you know that the canon has to do with, it's a term that is a religious term. And this is what we say canonical reading, canonical writing. This is the writing that is considered as being the best. The problem is, I think I'm responding to all of you, I don't know, who decides about the best? What is the best and what is the worst? Hence here, what criteria or measurement do we have to say that this is the best and that's the worst? Canon comes in Arabic, I said to my students a few times, and who sets the rule? Canon are the first meaning of canon are the religious scholars, who read and decide about the value of what is being written. They decide about the value of what is being written in accordance to what? To see whether they follow the rule of the cultural values or not. So if, for instance, I'll give you an example. The satanic verses would be certainly burnt immediately because it doesn't follow certain rules. So it's uncanonical, so it متبعش القانون مش تبع قانون القانون شكون يخلقوا سلطة So that authority that created that is the one who decides about the value of something and the lack of value of that. Hence here the notion of objectivity. Who is objective? Sometimes I'm not even objective myself. It's a word that is normally objective and subjective. The objective, we say that science is radically objective, while we know that even science itself, hard sciences, are not objective. There is a big dispute now today about the vaccine.
Yes.
About what the hell is there? Why is it in there? We know that Thomas has developed it. So we know that the implication also, the implication of science in so many other things. So this is a problem of ethics of. There is in the faculties of medicine, there are professors that are specialized in the ethics of the practice of medicine. So these are ideas. Instead of considering them, yes, they are important, of course, but neglecting them by being ethical. I repeat the idea of ethic. The ethical is even against the question. Now I come to the question here: what is the difference between moral, what is moral, and what is ethical? Staying back,
Have you heard of Steinbeck, the one who wrote The Grapes of Wrath, the one who wrote To Mice and Men? This is an American.
We thought it was.
Yeah. This is an American author, or anybody else, an American author who was very, very critical about, politically speaking, by writing novels. He was very critical about the political affairs of the United States, about injustices, etc. People would say what? This is, the morality would say that he is not patriotic. That's morality. ما يحبش بلاده. This is someone who hates his nation. ولاد أحمد, why am I going to listen? ولاد أحمد في تونس was considered as a pervert.
And now Michel Foucault, did you hear?
Michel, yeah. Was considered. Who considered that? Do we consider that these people are actually radically bad? Steinbeck believed that he was the best of patriots. Ouled Ahmed, when he says Ilahi, because people consider that Ouled Ahmed was an atheist. One of his poems is Ilahi, لقد قتلوا ناقتي أعني عليهم. Is there anything, would you consider that this portion, this fragment, is ethical or what?
Blasphemy.
It's not a blasphemy. Is it a blasphemy? So who judges, who accuses, who gives the right to kill the other, even to murder the other, still without even knowing? We don't get that. Do you see what the crime is? So what is ethical here? What is ethical? Even consider yourself as we know that it is impossible to be completely just and fair in your life. It is impossible. But there is a Professor Hartman. Jeffrey Hartman, literary criticism and his romanticism, saying, at least, like Derrida too, at least let's do our best. Our obligation is to do our best to come close to justice. Encore un effort. زيدوا شوية محاولة. Again, Terry Eagleton in there, and the body-mind self-other. You see that in body-mind, mind-body, the morality would say what? In Arabic, I love to give خدم مخك, mind, خدم مخك. البدن جسد وسخ الدنيا الفناء ماشي الفناء يبقى كان كذاب. So you see the privilege that we make of one thing over something else. Is this ethical? When we know that the body mind here make an entity in itself. So how can we consider that as when you are brought up to hate something? And to hate, not only respecting the difference, but hating a certain difference and considering it as insignificant, unimportant. We create a monologic culture with a monologic discourse without any relation to other, without any dialogue with otherness, with its otherness. Your question about, I'm happy that Maymoon has come back, he saves me. Your question about critical, what's critical and critical theory, and its relation with critical,
the second question.
critical discourse. As I think that Maymoon worked with a critical discourse analyst, linguist, late Professor Lebesi, and he would say about Latour, I think. Did you work about Latour?
No, basically genre analysis.
Do you have something, would you please enlighten us about critical discourse analysis?
Right.
As we have discourse analysis on the one hand, then critical discourse analysis for Elfan, and we'll go. I don't know whether I have, maybe we'll talk more. Is there anything else that readers of education responsibility? What is our responsibility? Our responsibility is to be as much as possible very precautious, very considerate, to be close to justice. With even a text, when you read a text and you destroy the meaning of the text, which is not there, because the meaning is always within the text, you have made violence of the text. So ethically is without violence. Caress the text. See, if the text contains violence, you have to, this is what we speak about, close reading. You have to bring it out. The text that I read from Narcissus and Acrophobia meant to welcome the other that is being probably violated, that there is an assault on otherness. I have given the examples through the philosophical history, literary history, cultural history, where the other is always, is always considered as unimportant. This creates what? Two cultures. The culture of those who dominate, who impose themselves, who impose their own rules on those who are silenced. And what do we get? We want progress. This is a dead culture. If you continue with that, this is a dead culture. Well, there's only one voice. I don't see what we expect or what we hope of those cultures in which you have only one voice. Probably discuss and discuss.
Right. Thank you very much, Professor Bahir. Yes, Professor, please go ahead.
I'm trying to answer the lady's question about after Eagleton and his criticism, especially his criticism of deconstruction. Sorry, and postmodernism, of course, which he sums up in, the bad guy is deconstruction. Of course, I think attacks, and I think I said it all, attacks on deconstruction have taken place from the far right to the far left, and Marxism is certainly a case in point. Marxism has a very strict methodology, a clear-cut methodology, which has been charted by many critics, and it's not to belittle it, but I think it's only normal that it would criticize deconstruction. I'm not sure Eagleton, who is on the other hand a fine reader also, can be a fine reader, has taken the pulse of what ethical reading is in deconstruction. But what I want you to say is that, and I think Simon Critchley says this also, it's that this attack on deconstruction shows very well that, shows that deconstruction is crucial, is central to the debate on, about the function of the political function of literature or the social function of literature. So, I'll argue that this very lashing criticism of deconstruction shows that it is central. Now, even after Derrida's day, the gentleman, the young man, asked a question about which Professor Beya partly, I think, answered about the interdisciplinarity. You said, can deconstruction affect other critical theory? Or critical theory? I think it has something. I'm not sure.
Can I rephrase it? Can I say
please,
it again?
Please.
So my question is, you spoke of critical thinking or critical theory from a largely literary perspective, so is that applicable to other fields? And if so, then we speak of interdisciplinarity. So how does interdisciplinarity affect critical thinking? Can you be critical thinking while, let's say, you're specialized in two fields at the same time? So does critical thinking affect interdisciplinarity, and how so? If yes, how so?
I will, personally, I have a clear-cut opinion about that, which involves also myself, of course. It's that, for example, it's very possible to have a deconstructive reading of linguistic discourse. I'm not saying that this is possible in the state of affairs of Tunisian English, in the English context in Tunisia. It's very difficult at the time being, but it is certainly feasible. And as a matter of fact, deconstruction, for example, to use one particular method of reading, because it is involved with language, with primarily, and the instability of language, should apply to any linguistic text. Deconstruction is not, by the way, does not simply apply to text. It applies to architecture. It applies to sciences. To politics, to arts, the visual arts, the media. So it can very well apply to linguistics. So this interdisciplinarity, the effect of is certainly possible. But I'm not saying it's perhaps difficult to envisage at this stage in the context of Tunisian Englishes, the Tunisian English class. Talking about university or school.
Yes.
That's what I believe, because there have been so many, this is not the time to debate the crisis that we are facing, and I'm sure my colleagues have something to say about this. But I believe so absolutely, it should open up scope. The gentleman asked about Levinas. And fine question. A very difficult question also. You said about the self and the other, and yeah. By the way, this notion of objectivity. Did you mention objectivity? You did. I agree with Professor Beya here. Even Derrida would argue that there is no objective reading. Objectivity is not possible so long as there is a fundamental instability in text, which is, because, and this instability is at the core of the letter itself. The grammatology is all about that. So there's no objectivity. Pure objectivity doesn't exist. But there is an effort that one can make towards an ethical reading by opening the reading to, allowing the other to respond, including the other. And here, of course, we move to Levinas. I think we mentioned this earlier on, in the sense that I think I quoted from Levinas when it says, ethics is what takes place during an encounter with another. The problem, says Levinas, is that the other refuses this reduction of being the other, and this refusal of the reduction incites respect from the ego towards the other, etc. And Levinas adds that hence we feel responsible and obliged to respond to the other. And responsibility is what Derrida says. So Derrida joins, in fact, Levinas here.
Even if it is a burglar.
It says responsibility and respect.
He refers
For
to
the
the other as a burglar, as a guest, and a burglar.
Exactly.
Even if it's unruly other,
Exactly.
it has to exist on its own terms,
Exactly.
and its moral obligation.
And cannot be dismissed.
Even
though he's a burglar.
Yeah.
And so this is a very interesting question, which is quite difficult to it's very philosophical. But as point. And there is this is why the ethical turn in reconstruction is very interesting. The ethics. Very interesting because, like my friend and colleague was saying, encore un effort, camarade, encore. We have to strive to be more responsible, more respectful. Especially, I think, in these times of fake news, what's happening. We've seen it in the COVID, impending COVID crisis, but also, not only COVID. Fake news has become a plague nowadays, and so our responsibility as readers of texts and students is all the more greater.
Especially that the borderline between information and manipulation is very thin.
Of course. But it's a difficult task. It involves duty, this notion of duty. It's a difficult task, but we have to strive. And anyway, thank you very much. I'm not sure I answered all the questions.
I think
For you to be objective, just admit that you are not.
Being objective, I meant
And I think this is the best way. I don't think that we're going to have a discussion would end about this idea of objectivity. So we are all partial. It's like we are in between. So how do we measure? How do we measure that? If you forget about the idea of measuring, of using a ruler that defines objectivity and makes it in relation to the subjective. I believe that I find that the best thing for me to be objective is to be subjective in a certain way that as much as I respect my own subjectivity, I have to allow the other subjectivity to be with respect, of course, to the other. That's a kind of, that intersubjective relation which has nothing to do with. Still, I have a problem with violence. Huh? When there is no relation of violence with the other, then that's I think the ideal way of living with the other.
So I have a suggestion here, sir. Now we may give our students their own works to read, and then see whether they would allow to exert violence on themselves, on their own text. Though here, of course, we know that we are not allowed to talk about authorial intentions, but we can never sanction someone for something who if you like, he never intended. So, this is the point. I think that we need to include the ethical component in our interpretation of texts, and that would be the.
But I would love Maimoun to continue with the idea of critical discourse, and because this is I think your point here, the point about this interdisciplinary critical thinking. How does it work with other disciplines? Because this is a literary, and how about?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor. Indeed. So that's what I was going to talk about in fact, interdisciplinarity, which is the topic of one of the lectures provided to you, I think 2 weeks ago, by Professor Muhammad Jabbar as well. So, the interrelation that exists between disciplines. We talk about intertextuality, interdisciplinarity, interdiscursivity even, to the extent that sometimes there is a tendency towards failing to identify the boundaries, the border, what separates fields, disciplines, discourses from each other. Back to the question of Mansour, I think, which concerns the link between critical theory and CDA. As you certainly know, at the beginning there was the text, and the text, if I am to disport the quote here, at the beginning there was text, and the text was with man, and the text was man, and man became discourse. I hope I'm not opening the doors of hell again. So there were text analysis, then discourse analysis, and then critical discourse analysis. And as you certainly know, CDA, critical discourse analysis, has taken from different approaches, theories, methods, which were predominant, and which are still definitely predominant, being impacted by paradigms, the widespread, the most influential theories that existed. And this is an illustration of disciplines and fields taken from each other, which takes us back to interdisciplinarity. So CDA investigates language, or let's say discourse, in a critical way. And maybe one of my best illustrations, I'll go back to subjectivity, again, one of my best illustrations of discourse analysis, or maybe definitions or identification of scope, is that one put by Van Dijk when he said, in response to criticism of bias in CDA, when he said critical discourse analysis is biased and proud to be biased. And the sense that CDA actually defends, talks about instances of power and reveals injustices in society, focusing, as you know, if you read the works of CDA's critical discourse analysts, I'm talking about Van Dijk, Van Leeuwen, Verclaaf, Widdowson as well. So, and especially Van Dijk, who focuses on instances of racism, sexism, stigmatization in language, and using language in order to as a tool of power, to exert power, making use of language. But I would like to thank you very much. That's an interesting question indeed. I'm covering it in first year master degree students class entitled Discourse Analysis and English Language Teaching. I invite you to attend it as well. It's the 4th chapter concerning CDA and applications of CDA even in ELT, and also prospects in research, etc. Briefly, I would like to ask Professor Beya concerning subjectivity. Yes, agree with you that sometimes we are subjective, that's a reality, and we need to respect others' subjectivity as well. My question is, what's the link between this way of thinking, the link between it and postmodernism? In the sense of yes and no, right, in postmodernism.
What's the link between?
This idea of I am subjective, the other is subjective as well, and it is fine.
Mm-hmm.
So what is truth here? And how to find answers then? And what is the link between critical theory and the idea of postmodernism today? I'm announcing the death of postmodernism. You know I'm a terrorist, right?
Please keep up from that concept of death. It's enough for us.
I think that the question should be addressed to Professor Bahlila. Professor Bahlila has been teaching literary theory for 30 years. I'm only a reader, so I think that if you had to relate it to Professor Bahlila, because he's teaching postmodernism and all that stuff, and Professor Nima,
Sure.
know that. So,
Sure indeed.
I'll certainly appreciate and will learn from your responses to Neymo's question, because these big questions irritate me and make me feel so small. So I have to leave the masters of the literary theory courses.
Now we always stick to the classical theories. We know what is the pre-structures, the classical ones,
No,
and
I
then
like
the
his
post. But that post now. We still did not.
I don't even know
go
what's before the post. Modern post.
No, till a particular, let's say, name becomes available for this.
This is terrifying. This is terrible.
And you know me,
because in linguistics they have to deal with recent, fresh.
Make them love. You know, by being. Don't ever fear someone who speaks when you don't understand him. Don't ever fear someone you don't understand. I don't understand him, you don't have to fear him. Don't say that this is too much for me, because I myself, I'm serious now, I spent years and years and years incapable of grasping anything simply because their discourse is so frightening, so ambiguous, that you cannot get or understand. And those who understand were those also that made me feel inferior. And so what I recommend at this age
nearly retirement age, what I recommend you to do is don't ever be afraid. Spend much time. Go back to the text. Read and reread any text. One day you will be the master of the text, and certainly you will understand what I mean here by ethical approach to a certain text. The ethical approach of these texts here are those texts that you welcome as another. And in that notion of hospitality here, there is no enmity between what the text you read and yourself. I think I'm running away.
It's okay, it's fine.
I don't, because I'm addressing myself to the students and I'm trying to help them. Don't be afraid. Never ever get carried by what you don't understand. That's the
I just, you know, I don't want to clearly Dr. Beniti's question, although it is, of course, a very obvious one. The question of truth. I mean, to what extent is subjectivity valid? To what extent, I mean, how far are we from the truth? And this is something that Derrida, of course, has written about extensively. You know, for the truth imperative, la vérité, la nature, etc., etc. This notion of the truth, of course, difficult to thrash it out now. You know, this. I think Professor Beya, who first said, you know, who didn't want to answered it indirectly, very well by insisting on this notion of the necessity to open up to the other, you know, this Levinasian attitude that Derrida adopts originally, but also the necessity of being ethical, you know, to be close. But the truth is there. There is such a thing as a truth, says Derrida, but it's not what one expects it to, you know, to be. You know, it's not black or white, or it's not an algorithm or a mathematical result. I don't know why I'm thinking of Ian Forster. Ian Forster once said in I think it's 2 Cheers for Democracy, small book, very interesting book. He says about decency, you know, what it is to be decent. He says, if I had the choice between choosing between my country or my friend, I hope, and people were, you know, expectations, I hope I'd have the guts to choose my friend. Albert Camus, dans l'étranger, says exactly the same thing. Si j'avais le choix entre choisir la civilisation ou ma mère, je choisirais sans hésiter ma mère. All right. Decency is, you know, comes in all, you know, is part of our humanity, and what I wanted to say here is that the notion of truth is something that remains quite relative, and perhaps it's this relativity that, you know, which makes it, you know, just like language. You know, Saussure, when you argue that the arbitrariness of language, you know, you insist on the importance of the arbitrariness of language, and the linguists here will. It's this arbitrariness of language which allows it to be creative, exactly, and free. So I think there's a need, you know, a necessity also for subjectivity and relativity. I know I haven't answered the question.
It's okay. In fact, yeah, it's okay. In fact, I remember in 2017, I think. Under the supervision of Professor Abdennebi, may he rest in peace, my mentor, teacher, and role model, in fact. we organized a conference entitled Objectivity in Text Analysis and Research Methods. And maybe we need to organize maybe another conference, subjectivity in text analysis and research methods, just to explore the issue. Maybe it needs additional analysis, additional interpretations need to be considered.
When you talk
yes.
about, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you talk about the right of being subject or something like that, or having two subjectivities, one subjective reading and another subjective reading, and it is right. But here I think that it's at the core of deconstruction, because in fact now deconstruction calls for reading a text from different perspectives, that the text is open to a multiplicity of interpretations, but one subjective reading is contaminated by another subjective reading, but by the end we will not have truth. Now, there is no true meaning, that's the point. I mean, that meaning is out of reach, that meaning is slippery.
That's very interesting, very good, totally agree with you and totally respect this viewpoint as well. But my question is, what is truth? What is the answer? We need to provide an answer. I'm not saying the answer, I'm saying an answer. I'm not saying the truth.
I think that Professor will tell you truth is what you believe in, what one believes in.
Right.
Very philosophical now.
My last question, if you may, that was the first question. I don't know if colleagues have mentioned.
I'm still thinking about a post.
We'll talk about it. Maybe you can visit us again, and we can have another lecture to benefit from you, Professor. As you certainly know, the Platonic question: what is the relation between ideas and the empirical world of everyday reality? I would like to ask my dear professors here, Professor Beya, Professor Bahlila, about the implications of critical theory on learning and teaching, maybe implications. We have here third-year students as well as MA students who are interested in talking or in thinking about maybe a topic to investigate in next year in their memoirs, and maybe hot debates, hot major research lines in critical theory as well that they can investigate and in relation to critical theory that they can investigate and follow in their future research path. So hot debates and innovative ideas that they can investigate so that they don't keep repeating each other or other findings, other research related topics and themes in
becomes
general.
obsolete in a way and
Right. So that's why we talk about hot debates, hot research lines, maybe professors. For researchers.
For new research.
Yes, exactly.
I think I think the question relative to the
What?
to your first question. Relative, I think to
implications of CT critical theory in teaching and learning.
The question about empirical.
That's Platonic question. The relation. Stop with it. You talked about.
Very qualified to answer this. But concerning the new topics, I mean, do you have? I'm not sure. I know exactly what's taking place in Kairouan. Do you have? Do you have can students write an MA on the tree? Or are these just? What kind of research is
They can write an thesis.
The master is in literature, language, and civilization.
Okay.
So we are open to those three disciplines, and we, of course, will come and evaluate research proposal from students, either in literature or civilization. But now I see that they have that tendency towards interdisciplinary studies. I think
discourse analysis.
Discourse analysis, critical discourse analysis.
Because I was going to answer, and perhaps my answer will not be satisfactory, that at this stage, personally, I would not encourage MA students to write an MA on a theoretical issue. The best thing would be to still, adopt perhaps the traditional approach by referring to theory or by reading the text from one or two theoretical perspectives, but still text-based research. That is a research that is not purely theoretical. Thematical or not necessarily thematic, but from the point of view of literature, for example, choose a work and deal with it from postmodern perspective or whatever, or reader response. You see, some things that will help the student to engage in a close reading of the text, but will also enrich that reading, the interpretation with critical thinking, but nothing on theory per se, because it's too arduous and too abstract, and many of the issues involved in literary theory or even critical theory are philosophical, and we, literary people, we do not always have that background, the necessary background to understand the sophistication of certain philosophical issues. I myself, I'm at a loss, after more than 35 years or 40 years of teaching. So I would not encourage MA students to do a memoir on just literary theory. But read a text from the perspective of one or two theories, certainly. You see what I mean? This is my point of view, and I don't think at Abdennebi that we encourage this kind of research at this stage. To tell you the truth, even at the doctoral level, I mean, it's rare to have
Purely theoretical.
No.
Sorry, does this mean that we need to have an idiosyncratic viewing, a powerful view? Does this encourage for a personal interpretation of the text?
Personal, what do you mean?
Idiosyncratic, that is your own contribution, okay, your own interpretation of the text.
I mean, if you find, Professor Beya did it today, if you find, for example, if you conduct a deconstructive reading, for example, of the Smith of Narcissus, there are findings which are really, really very interesting. If this is what you mean, yes, certainly. But it has to be convincing and backed up with solid arguments, not just
from the text.
Right. You see, I mean, you see what I mean. For example, I remember I attended once doctorat d'état at defense, and the candidate, I'll not name him, was it was more than 30 years ago, and the candidate was very fond of interpreting in a certain way, like for example, he was working on a text on a set of novels by Margaret Drabble, English novelist. And I remember it came back again and again. For example, the columns in the room were this is what he says, what he argues, represent phalluses, a phallus, Lacanian. And without, just it became impressionistic and unconvincing, because it was, it was not backed up with Lacan, extracts from Lacanian theory, but just something very general and anyway, made everybody feel uneasy, not because of the nature of the metaphor, but because it was so simplistic. Anyway, so in any case, I mean, this is what I mean. So idiosyncratic, but backed up with solid arguments, evidence, not musings, because how can an MA student, I'm not belittling. I'm sure some of you are very good, and I can see this. today. But one has to be humble and modest, at the beginning. So it's good to show your mastery of certain basic issues and apply them on things, but not swim in the ocean of theory. Just plunge in it like this. It would be quite dangerous, and it would be unfair, I think, to ask her. So, but concerning the hot issues in I think one of them was raised today. Deconstruction, I believe, is something the ethical turn in deconstruction is something that will stay. It will come back again and again, and the influence of this particular view, but also Marxist studies have witnessed a kind of new impetus today with neo-Marxists, and there's a lot going on. There's also eco-criticism, the field, ecology, ecofeminism also, eco-criticism, ecofeminism. Yeah, there's a lot going on.
And the newest is affect theory. Affect theory, yes. Theory of emotions. Now it's returned to the idea, mind, body, and now it's the body, the corporal need. So you can see that if we get into the idea of death, of death itself, we can think about death, and always the aftermath of this, because what I wanted to show you is that these different theories here make up a tradition, and that tradition goes on through what? Through transformation. And in any transformation, you have an addition and a deletion. So something you add, something you delete from the past, and something you add. And that's the repetition with the difference. To help you with to answer the question of objective and subjective at this level, deuxième année, we did time research proposal. No, to answer the question of subjective and objective, and you talked about my own argument. Do I have to what is bring to the research? Bring your argument to my contribution, personal contribution to research. I'm going to give you an extreme example. Where Derrida, again from Derrida, he was asked a question about subjectivity, and sometimes he stammers a little bit because sometimes the questions of the audience are unexpected. And this is, you talk about it, and I attended one of his conferences. He started to be always hesitating about what kind of answer would go to the listener, and the one who is aswafi, the one who is thirsty, hungry of getting an answer that comforts him. So see, relation to the other is a relation of responsibility. I mean, you are seeking some comfort. If you don't get it from me, you say you might hate me, and I give you, and you're right to hate me. And so he said, even I is a citation. Even I, the pronoun personnel I, is a citation. Because I did learn it. Learn it from my father, my mother, who says, because a child would, when does a child start by saying I? And when you say I, who is speaking? Are you sure that it is I? That you are? Here means that our identity itself is a citation. Our identity itself is a citation. It means that because it is made up of all those discourses that we went through. We have the family, the discourse in your family, that's the discourse of the family, which is also the discourse of family is also taken from another discourse, the discourse of society. The discourse of society is related to the discourse of politics. And so you have all these forces in you. So where's your I?
Exactly.
So I what? Where's I?
So if you go through a lifetime listening, you can't be an
Formally, I would suggest that there are some of my colleagues who insist upon these things to put their own perspective. So you have to impose. Say, I argue. I argue for what? Argue about what? And what's my argument? My ethical recommendation is that use the passive. The passive is something that helps you to escape the idea of the subject, I mean, the idea of authority, the phallic subject, the I, is phallic. It's very phallic. So, instead, you can probably start by using in literature, using a particular focus. You can say that I'm using what I did today is just fixing, see how Plato is in narcissism, see how Plato is there. So if I say a Platonic reading of a particular text, then I will have to know what Plato says and see how they get confused. Confusion is a fusion with. So it's a fusion with. How they get confused. How do I see the text through the lenses of it? This is only one part of the meaning of the text. Just as you have seen the notion of concept, the concept and copy by users has taken us to read a different text through that particular lens, through that particular process. So be focused instead of making generalizations to big ideas. Be specific in your own subtopic. Very. As I said, I don't know what your research proposal is about.
It's not necessarily related to, it's related to tech.
To?
Technology-based learner autonomy is the topic.
Oh, that's linguistics.
Yes.
Learn autonomy, tackling.
I think, Professor Beya, our students are struggling with that voice. I mean, whether they are asked to voice themselves, especially at the level of the MA, when they write their MA dissertation, or they need to hedge.
We recommend hedging, actually, using hedging devices. This might explain that. Maybe this could be attributed to. Yes, exactly. So we always discuss our students to use I think that, or I argue that, or
So
I
this is what we
believe
mean by
that.
hedging.
Right.
Yes.
Hedging devices. I think Ken Highland worked a lot on this. He's production.
They have their own terminology.
Just
Yeah, thank you.
I would like to simply say something in relation to what my friend Professor Beya was saying. Do not underestimate the power of humor in making a point. Again, going back to Derrida, I remember humor. And the importance of the context. As you said, Derrida was very sensitive to the other, precisely, both live but also in writing. But when he was addressing an audience, he was quite good and quite careful. No histrionics, but very careful, because he looks at people and listens.
Yeah.
And I remember I attended a series of lectures that he gave at the University of California, Irvine. And it was the opening lecture on cannibalism. You know this one? And it's a seminar on cannibalism in philosophy, in Western philosophy. It's been published, by the way, by his editor, Galilei, a long time ago. They published all of his lectures. And it was the opening lecture, cannibalism, and he had a cold. He was coughing, and he says, "I'm sorry, I will say the first word in French. Je suis désolé, mais j'ai un chat dans la gorge." Vous connaissez l'expression j'ai un chat dans la gorge. Ça veut dire I have a cold, simply. And those who mastered French in the room laughed. And those who didn't, they put, I've got a cat in my throat. He doesn't stand in, he doesn't resist translate, And but it set the tone for the conference.
Yeah.
It set the mood for the conference. So humor is very important.
I suppose.
I mean, because humor involves interaction, as you know. We're not into humor is dual and multifarious and works in different ways. And there's nothing like intelligent humor to make a point. So don't underestimate it. But it has to be well done. Sorry.
The art of reflex.
The
Art of reflex.
Yes. Rhetorical. Humor is certainly. So anyway, I'm sorry to have been so.
Thank you very much, Professor Fahila. Now that we finished our lecture today, I'd like to express my sincere thanks to Professor Abdennebi Beya, my sincere thanks and gratitude to Professor Abdennebi Beya and Professor Fahila for accepting to come today from Tunis to Kairouan and insisting on delivering a direct face-to-face lecture to students of Kairouan and students also from other surrounding regions coming to attend this lecture in particular. I would like to thank you also for attending it and to thank my friends and colleagues, Dr. Mudar and Dr. Nadia, and all our colleagues today, teachers of the English department who attended this lecture. Thank you all for attending it, and I would like to thank you again, Professor Beya, and wish to see you again here in Kairouan.
You're welcome anytime, and when I was thrilled to come back to Kairouan, I did teach here, I think, for 4 years, for the second year. That was in 2015, 16, 17, 18, and 19. Like the second year, my third. So it's always great, and I thought that I would see some of those. Are you the one? Yes. Yeah. Well, so I'm so happy. I'll certainly remember you.
That's a disguise, sir.
And I always say yes to Kairouan.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
may you be blessed.
Thank you.